Thank you so much for the invitation to be able to speak about the movement associated with LifeSchoolHouse. And as mentioned in the intro, this was a very small initiative that started in my living room in Nova Scotia, Canada, where I live and work and play in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And as a settler in the community, my partner and I were having deep and intentional conversations about how we wanted to raise our children in this space and to be respectful stewards of the land that we were using to raise our family, and how we were going to do that as respectfully as possible, and landed on the idea of sharing the space, sharing our home, sharing our living room with as many people as possible. So we were treading as lightly as we could on this land while we were here. And the idea of a folk school grew from that intention. A folk school has Scandinavian roots in tradition. It's a model that we've adapted that enables people to come together and teach and learn the skills that exist within the community as a way to come together and get to know each other differently. So I found myself with two small children living in a new city and feeling like I didn't know my neighbors well enough to lean on them if need be. And the idea of bringing a folk school together created a different sense of connection. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how that evolved, especially words that are a little bit unusual. It's less common than it used to be involved in barter-based communities. But what that means at LifeSchoolHouse was that our intention was to invite as many people as possible to be as inclusive as possible in our learning community as it was growing. And that meant using really accessible spaces in our community. Literally, my living room was where this started, by saying, we have an open and accessible space and all are welcome. In addition to that kind of core value, barter, what meant that the people who were invited to teach were members of our community, neighbors, folks that we would meet at a farmer's market, folks we connect with at a library who had all kinds of different skills. And we invited them to come and teach that to small groups of people, 6 or 8 or 10 folk that we could gather from within the community to teach skills of weaving or carving or knitting or baking or language skills and things that they had learned from their grandmother, things they'd learned through their education, things they'd learned by putting their hands to the work. And they would come teach the skill to a small group of people. And instead of paying to participate in the classes, the attendees would bring items, gifts, bartered items that they could leave with the facilitator to appreciate their time, to appreciate their talent, but also to humanize the exchange between people. So giving someone $5 versus giving them jam that you made with the rhubarb that you grew in your garden, it's a fundamentally different kind of exchange. And what we started to notice was that the skills sharing platform was leading to deeper connection and community. Those shared learning experiences became something that that connected people very differently than transactional connection they may have found in other ways within the community. So where I think this connects to the work of this group in particular is that with this work, we're really addressing the social poverty that a lot of communities are feeling, that lack of connection, that sense of social isolation and the barriers that exist between people. At the root of what we were doing, people, they weren't coming for the classes. It didn't matter what we were offering. They were coming anytime something was offered because they wanted the feeling of being in a room together, having deep conversation and feeling like they knew each other differently. And that became quite a beautiful thing that grew out of there. In our early days, we were just exploring this idea really as a way to raise my children. There's a lot of responsibility associated with raising children. I don't have all of the answers, but I knew that they'd be better off if they had time to spend even just in the home when these things were happening with people who come from different cultures, people who share different languages, people whose traditions are different than theirs, especially people from those different cultures and language backgrounds and religious backgrounds who were willing to share and connect with others in this community-based space. So fortunately, my children don't know that this is not the way that others live their lives. For them, it was just very normal to have people coming in and out of their backyard, in and out of the kitchen space. And we were really working to create a world where people, through those shared learning experiences, were feeling more connected with each other and showing that type of way to live in a neighborhood, in a community, was possible. So really focused on the sense of well-being. Also, because it's a volunteer-run organization that's barter-based, we were introducing a lot of ideas about civic participation, like how, if you want to have a community that looks and feels this way, you have to be a part of building it, because it doesn't just happen. So there is the act of lifting this up in community that we were sharing as a network, showing other people how to create this type of a learning community in their own spaces. Pops up in parks and in libraries and in living rooms all across Nova Scotia. Then we've expanded out across Canada. We have several in the States and a few in Mexico as well that have launched as a result of our experiment since 2018. The model is really simple. It's freely shared into the commons as well. So at the end of this, I'll show you how to access the lessons that we've learned. But at its core, as I've mentioned, the facilitators are individuals from community who have knowledge, they're knowledge keepers. Their skills, they hold those skills and they're willing to share. They're willing to share based on a barter exchange, so non-monetized transaction, right? Those are the core, those facilitators, the core skill sharers. But we've also always advocated for a host, a person whose job it is to make sure that people feel welcome when they come in this space. They have a cup of tea in their hand. The facilitator feels cared for. That there's the act of bringing a community together is more than just the skill. There's so much more to it than that, that takes that role of hosting and caretaker. And we found that that pairing has led to a great sense of community development, facilitating really simple exchanges in an informal but super deep and meaningful way. It light on organization, deep on meaning. I'm going to show a little video here, please.
In 2018, we were new to the neighborhood. We had a really simple idea. We wanted to open up our house as a learning community, a space where neighbors could come and meet each other and share their skills, like a modern-day folk school. Welcome to LifeSchoolHouse. In our first year, we offered space for more than 50 workshops with 35 different facilitators. What makes this project unique is that all of our classes are offered on a barter basis. All LifeSchoolHouse spaces are offered free of charge, and facilitators are compensated by the class participants who bring bartered items or gifts. No barriers to participation, all are welcome. The classes we offer often fill within minutes of posting. We have thousands of followers and we're busting at the seams. We need your help to keep supporting our community. We want to gather and share instruction manuals from our facilitators. We want to support our hosts with training to become even stronger community leaders. We are better off as a province because spaces like this exist in our communities. Join a class today at LifeSchoolHouse.
I always like watching that video because it was created just before the pandemic. And I find it interesting that we were talking so much about social isolation and loneliness before we found ourselves in a case where we were not able to reach out and connect. And so much of what we learned, like as an organization, this should have been the thing that did not make it through the pandemic. Advocating for in-person gatherings in people's homes should not be a model that was able to grow and blossom during the pandemic. But instead, we found that this was exactly what people needed, and it did grow. And the draw that came from community, tell me more, how do I do this, was because people were starting to identify that this is really what is needed in this space. We asked, like, is this working? And what we heard was that the attendees, like I said, weren't coming because they wanted to participate in the classes. They were coming because they were looking for that sense of community. They loved the idea sharing that was happening, but it was the sense of welcome and the idea that it promoted creativity individually that helped create the draw that was coming from community, the social connection, the friendship. These were the things that it turns out people were really seeking and craving. So that was where we put our attention by really investing in helping the hosts themselves learn more about community development. As it started to grow outwards, we did find that the shared kind of methodology of Life Schoolhouse is at the center of this, a community focus. All of these things are important, and we prioritize the sense of connection and the leadership, the agency to be involved in your community. But as it pops up in different people's homes or different spaces, they'll often have different focus areas. So some people will draw workshops together that are food security focused. Others are really focused on welcoming newcomers into their community, and it can take on many different shapes and forms. All we do is say, here's what we've learned. And through your own application, it's amazing what you can do with a barter-based community that uses this skills sharing platform. So in presentations like this and in conversations with others, we have created all kinds of resources that we're glad to share. They're really just stories that come from our community, stories that come from our hosts, have been collected and pulled together into a book that we call Tea for Community. It's downloadable on our website, and it enables people who are curious about this as a method to do community development where they are. We started with $5, by the way, because it took $5 to open a bank account. We ran for over a year in this barter-based approach. We were able to do well over 50 workshops in our living room with $5 in the bank, because we opened it up to the community to say, you know, in what way, what resources do we have that we can connect in with in our community? Things like mason jars that were donated enabled us to do jam making workshops. And if we wanted to do woodworking, we could use the scraps from somebody's deck as a way to learn about carving. We didn't have to go out and source all of these things. So we have all kinds of ideas that are shared and supports in place to support new hosts that are getting started, inclusive of training and story sharing, as well as peer mentorship from the existing hosts that like to lean into supporting other hosts in their community. So if you're interested, the website is just LifeSchoolHouse.com.
Jennifer, I just wanted to commend you on not only starting this work, but for it sustaining itself through the pandemic. I'd like to hear a bit more about that. So, like, was everyone wearing masks, or was there this agreement that people were comfortable being without masks inside the house? So I'd like, can you paint a picture for us for that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. In Atlantic Canada, especially in the early days of the pandemic, like everyone else, of course, we were on lockdown. And the lockdowns in Atlantic Canada were shorter, I feel, than they were in a lot of other spaces, because there was a move towards creation of an Atlantic bubble where we couldn't leave the region very easily, but within there was allowance for group gatherings. There were several months where, you know, we were not able to gather. But what was most interesting to me was that the community was so interdependent by that point, because we've been doing this kind of work for a couple of years, that you started to see all kinds of people from within the community reaching out and saying, are you okay? Like, how is this going? Dropping soup to each other. They were so connected. In addition to skills sharing, one of the other pieces of work that we do every month is that we come together and do barter-based maker swaps. So if you're a knitter and you've knit 1 million scarves, you can bring your scarves and trade them for bread or for all kinds of different things that will show up at the swap table. Obviously, we couldn't do large group gatherings. So within the community, they designed virtual swaps where people would drop off hundreds of things at my house. I would curate little bags to exchange those items and leave them in that the front porch public space, and people could come back and pick up their bags of gifts from each other within the community. We got creative. And then into the experiment was able to continue because the majority of the programming was happening within the Atlantic bubble. And then again, the call out to spaces like our programming that was happening in New Brunswick, Ontario, and out west really started to grow a lot the summer of 2021, where we were allowed to have a little bit more of these small group gatherings, but the need for connection was really strong. So I think that was a challenging time that led to great creativity, because it was something that the community identified for itself as something being really necessary. They weren't willing to let it go, which was kind of inspiring to watch.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Karen, for asking that question or making that comment. Jennifer, I do have a question about sometimes community members feel a little bit weird about what they have to bring. And I was wondering if community members came with that. They, you know, you're saying this is a strength-based approach. People have strengths to bring, and people are like, I don't know that I have anything to offer. Did community members come in feeling like that at all?
Um, oh yeah. You know what's interesting though? We've done children's swaps where children will bring things that they've made with their hands. They'll color a picture, they'll bring that. They're so proud of it. Children never ask, is my thing enough? But when we do the adults swaps, it's on everyone's mind. You can see it in their body language. Like, is this enough? Is this good enough? And I'm not sure when we take that on as a barrier for ourselves, when that transition happens. But the children really celebrate each other's things differently, and the adults often are a little more reticent or yeah. So it certainly does happen. It takes some time. And that's the thing about building intentional communities. The first time you invite someone to participate and they say, well, I don't have enough, or my thing isn't good enough, it isn't practiced enough to bring. You have to keep saying, I really want you here. You're really welcome. I see you. I value the thing that you created. And to really get to a place of inclusion, you have to keep inviting so that they understand that the invitation is intentional. So yes, definitely seen that with adults. That's the role of the host, is to really lean in with intention around inclusion, to make sure that people know if what you can bring is your grandma's chocolate chip cookie recipe, just the recipe itself has like multi-generations of history, that has tremendous value. The clippings from your plant that you kept alive during the last couple of years, that's kind of wonderful. And you should bring those and know that they're valued as well.
All right, amazing. Thank you so much, Jennifer. You shared so much inspiration already, and Rowena has added in the chat for everyone Jennifer's email address, which is jennifer@lifeschoolhouse.com. So in case Jennifer does need to drop off before we get to the Q&A, you can always message her directly.